4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to Racing World, brought to you by Perspective Group. It's your motorsport podcast show in conjunction with Race Control Magazine.
Welcome to another edition of Racing World. Well, I'm about to join Bob very soon as we count down to the Bathurst 1000. It's one of those races that stops everyone across both New Zealand and Australia. They always say the Melbourne Cup, but deep down it's really Bathurst. And we've got plenty to talk about. We're only a couple of days away from the race now. Obviously, it's happening a lot later than what it has done in previous years due to the COVID thing. But let's join Bob as we preview this year's Bathurst 1000. Well, joining me now, as always, in your little box, and I'm in my little box, Bob McMurray. Now, before we get to Bathurst, because we're really playing Bathurst up in this show, there is, of course, the second to last Formula One Grand Prix of the year this weekend.
There is, at the Saudi Arabian circuit, which is amazing when you look at it. Who's it going to benefit? I don't know, really. Before we get to that, I've got to say the sad news of Frank Williams passing this last week. I got a lot of stories about Frank Williams, and he was a lovely guy. And there is a story, which is in the book a long time ago. I actually worked for him, or my wife and I worked for him for 2 years while we were working for McLaren. That was a bit odd, but Frank was nothing more than a gentleman and one of the giants of motorsport, Formula One, one of the giants that put Formula One on the whole worldwide perspective and brought it to what it is today. He's passed away, so it's sad news. There's so many eulogies and obituaries about him that I don't need to go on, but nonetheless, it was a very personal thing.
I think a thing that stood out in my mind was dating back to when we first met each other in Melbourne, and then when you were working for me when I was at TVNZ, and we did the preview shows, and the combination of Sir Frank and Patrick Head together, and the warmth of Patrick Head, which I experienced once, and that was more than enough. But yeah, a very big moment probably in the sport of Formula One because of who Frank Williams was and where that team was. But we've got to move on, and this Grand Prix this weekend, it's not going to decide a championship, but it could have a big impact on one.
No, that's absolutely right. There's only two main games in town, really, when we think about it in motorsport terms this weekend. One, obviously, is the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. As I said, circuit, I don't know. There's all sorts of scenarios. If you've got a moment, listen to this. Verstappen's now 8 points ahead, right? And I've actually had to write it down because I can't bloody remember all this. If Verstappen finishes first with the fastest lap and Hamilton finishes sixth or lower, it's Verstappen. So these are all on Verstappen winning. If Verstappen finishes first, Hamilton finishes seventh or lower, Verstappen wins. If Verstappen finishes second with the fastest lap and Hamilton finishes 10th or lower, Verstappen wins. Verstappen finishes second, Hamilton. This goes on. This will go on for another at least 4 or 5 sentences. The one thing that gets me a little bit about it, this thing about the fastest lap. Well, Bottas or Perez getting the fastest lap could decide who is the world champion. Because you know what they do at the end? They put somebody out to get the quickest lap. So that could actually, somebody not unrelated, obviously they're in the team, but somebody getting the fastest lap with no right to the fastest lap because they come in at the very last lap or something like that, put on a new set of tires and go and get the fastest lap, that could decide the world champion. I don't like that. I think that is wrong. I don't like that at all.
They're showboating the fastest lap, really, aren't they? As we well know, and it's a very easy thing to do.
And the thing is, they do, with that fastest lap, it could decide the championship just by taking the fastest lap away. Is what I mean, really. Yeah. Because there could be 1 point in it. Bottas or Perez goes out there, does the fastest lap. They're 12th or 13th. That means nobody gets the fastest lap point, but nor does the guy, perhaps Verstappen or Hamilton, who had it in the first place. So that does annoy me a little bit. So, I mean, even without the fastest lap, it's going to be tight anyway, whichever way it goes. So it's going to be a hell of a weekend. This weekend in points, Hamilton can't win it this weekend. Verstappen can. That's the whole point. He could take it already. Also at Saudi, we've got, and that's enough just to see all that. Fantastic course with huge straights, so could benefit Hamilton. We got Formula 2 back in action with Liam and Marcus, Liam Lawson, Marcus Armstrong. And then we got the young driver test, which Liam is involved in after Yas Marina when he's driving Formula 1 car. So that in itself is a very exciting thing. We'll be able to talk all about that next week, I'm sure, when things round out a little bit. So, yep. I don't know what's going to happen this weekend. Who the hell does? No idea. Can't predict the future, but it's worth watching it.
Yeah, the only regret I've got is that in theory we should have been making this podcast with me up there and you back down here. But hey,
well, the better thing, of course, would have been you up there and me up there with you helping you. Then we wouldn't have had to do it over the electronic system. But there you go. So yeah, watch this weekend. It'll be good.
Moving across the Tasman, as I alluded to in the intro, the race that stops both nations, and no, we're not talking the Melbourne Cup, we're talking the Bathurst 1000. As it's Thursday now, when we're recording this, so it is, a little bit before the race, but there's so much happening already. There's been accidents in the development series. The lap times are tumbling. I saw a 2:05 before, so the lap times are there. The track is obviously rubbering in very well. Temperature is working well so far. I still have this question mark about what the heat will do. So much on-track action with, Toyota 86s, S5000s, Porsche, development series and the main game. It's a busy place, Bathurst.
It is indeed. And while we're talking here, it is Thursday morning, as you say, and it's actually on TV in the other room. Being recorded, I hasten to add. I only managed to see the first couple of laps, and unfortunately, the Brad Jones racing car, young Macaulay Jones, seemed to explode on the first lap. They say it might be engine with oil pressure. I don't know. I suspect it could be something else. I've no idea because I haven't seen the result yet. But weather forecast, dry and beautiful day today. Showers on Friday and Saturday, and then no showers on Sunday. So that could mix it all up a little bit, couldn't it? There has been, as you say, there's been some fairly major accidents, shall we say, or crashes outside of supercars, of course. And we've got quite a flock of Kiwis there. We've got Shane Van Gisbergen, Andre Heidengartner, Fabian Coulthard in the main game, Chris Pither coming in as Macaulay Jones' co-driver. In the Super 2, we've got Matt Payne, who I think this morning qualified sixth. Or fifth this morning because the session was red flagged, unfortunately, so he didn't get his fastest lap in. Brock Feeney's on pole for that. There's another Kiwi involved there, Martin Short, son of Jeff Short, who is the 86 category organizer here and Speedworks and all that sort of thing. Martin Short is Brock Feeney's engineer, so he'll be looking up for that. And of course, Brock Feeney and Martin Short stepping up to the main game next year. As well as Matthew Payne, we go down to Callum Hedge in the Porsche, and Madeline Stewart also in the Porsche. So there's a fair smattering of Kiwis over generally everything over the weekend. So it's good to keep an eye on them all, really.
Yeah, and I've got my eyes set too. It was always going to be, as we've talked about before, the head-to-head of the return of the legends, if you like, Engel versus Murphy. And unfortunately, it wasn't to happen. But I'm still intrigued to see how Engel plays this one out. And he came out with a statement the other day saying the enforcer will return, which I firmly believe he will, because that's the only way he knows how to drive a car. But it will just be interesting to see how that entry goes. It's a 12:15 start for a scheduled 7 o'clock-ish local time in Australia finish. There's so much that happens. The race tends to break itself into 3 phases. The crazy bit at the beginning for the first few laps, then it settles down into a sprint pace because it's certainly not really looked at as an endurer anymore. We get a little bit of a lull. Then we tend to get this rush of caution periods where a yellow brings another yellow, and then it starts to play itself out towards the finish. And then those last 2 hours is where it's a bit like the Indy 500. You've got to be in the 2-hour mark to go at Bathurst, and at Indy you've got to be in with the last 25 laps to go. So kind of the same thing.
Yeah, you're right, and it is such an easy place to make a mistake. We saw that in the Super 2 qualifying this morning when at Mazuris on 2 minutes before the end, which is why the red flag came in Super 2, he just made a mistake. He was going for pole position, and he would have been up the top too in another Triple Eight car. The sister car to Brock Feeney hit the wall and buggered that thing completely. And the unfortunate crash yesterday in Super 2 where the wheel nut came off the back of I forget his name, whose car it was now.
I watched that this
I mean,
morning.
just a total destruction of the car, which is
Very
such a
unlucky
shame.
too.
So,
And there's so much weight transfer that goes through the top when you come across McPhillamy and into that area of the track heading towards Skyline. And you know, it was the whole momentum thing forward into the wall, and the walls are unforgiving up there. So, you know, there's been a lot of milestone moments at Bathurst. We'll always look back. I'll look back fondly at the fact that that was the birth of, pretty much the birthplace of the late Jason Richards and Angus Fogg for Team Kiwi Racing. That's going back a long time now. It's 2001. You know, great era. Radisich there, the late Andrew Porter, or Mark Porter, I should say. You know, they're all moments that I was probably lucky to witness because I've been there with TVNZ when we produced the show there. I know you've been there a few times. It's a very special racetrack, just like there are many racetracks around the world, but Bathurst is, for us in this part of the world, it is very, very unique, isn't it?
it is, yeah. And the last time I went there, I've got to say, in 2017, I was in a really good bunch of guys. One of the wives of guys, in fact, Michael Clark's wife, went out and had these hats made, the Magnificent Seven. The seven were myself, David Oxton, Michael Clark, Garth Hogan, Jimmy Palmer, Baldrick, whose name is Peter Grant, Baldrick from down in Christchurch, and Keith Cowan from Christchurch. And we had a wonderful time. The Magnificent Seven rode again. Something I learned yesterday, listening to the broadcast, they had Brad Jones doing an awful lot of the commentary for Super 2.
Yes.
And he was talking about Jason Richards, and he said ever since Jason Richards passed away, in fact, before that, he told Jason that whatever happened in the future, Brad Jones racing cars would always carry a star on the car. Any Brad Jones racing car would carry a star on the car with JR's initials inside of it. And they closed up on that yesterday, and there it is on the side of the car, and it's been on those cars all that time. I never knew that. I never knew that Brad Jones Racing carried that star all the way through. So it's a wonderful thing, and it's a wonderful event, and it is an event. I mean, for God's sakes, they start on Monday morning and they finish on Sunday night. You know, it's, you don't get rallies lasting that long.
Look at the timetable just for race day Sunday. You know, the 86s are out on track at 8:30 in the morning, which is kind of similar to when we have a supercar event here in New Zealand, but it's non-stop. You know, you've got a supercar warm-up, you've got on-track entertainment, the S5000s are out there at 8 o'clock in the morning, Carrera Cup's out there at 11 o'clock, and then the race starts for 6 odd hours at 12 o'clock, you know. So it's a tradition of so many people, and again, an iconic event. And Shane Van Gisbergen may have won the championship, but there's nothing better than winning the Bathurst 1000.
Oh no, absolutely not. And favourites for the race? Well, okay, out of all the cars there, you could probably say that any one of 10 cars could win. And it's not impossible that any of the other 10 cars could win as well. Yeah. And out of those 10 cars, which favourites there are, I don't know. But you've got to think that Shane Van Gisbergen and Garth Tander are a pretty mean combination in the Triple Eight car.
Yeah, I think so.
They've got to be one of the best ones, as is the Wing Cup allowance combination as well. That's got to be a very reasonable combination too. Yeah, so know, and they're running Triple Eight on the Van Gisbergen car this weekend. Although they're calling everything as 97, they're not mentioning Triple Eight. It's only on the car, so everything stays as 97. But that's in not deference. That's in sort of what's the word?
It's a respect
appreciation.
Yes.
Yeah, appreciation of Roland Dane and his impending retirement. Well, if you believe retirement with Roland Dane, you're sillier than I am.
If you think that there's 10 cars that could possibly win this race, which one of the 10 is the one that's going to win?
Who knows? I don't know. It's going to be in the old adage, it's going to be the one that passes the finish line at the right time, at the right second, at the end of the race, ahead of everybody else. I've got no idea. I would say that if I had a favourite, it would be the Shane Van Gisbergen Tander car, but that's because Shane is Kiwi driver. Yeah. Andre Heimgartner, I think.
Oh, that would be amazing.
I got no bloody idea at all. I got about as much idea of that as who is going to win the Formula One World Championship. I think I know who's going to win the World Championship, Formula One, and I think I might know who's going to win Bathurst. but I don't know. I've got no idea.
We'll quote you on it next week and see what happens.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I think it will be a great race. The factors to take into account is a lot of pit stops that take place. As we've known over the years, there's all sorts of things that can happen during those pit stops, from, balaclava gate the year I was there, as to whether, people were wearing balaclavas, wheels spinning before they've come down off the air jacks, not enough fuel, the famous Greg Murphy, I'm taking a toilet stop, you name it. It all happened. But all of those factors do come into play. This is an endurance race, but it's an endurance race at a very high speed, at a very high speed track.
It is, absolutely. And one of the good things about it this year is, almost like you missed them completely, there's a crowd there.
Yeah.
And some of the crowd shots I've seen already, the around the mountain and all the rest of it, people are getting into it as they used to. So maybe there's not as many people there. I don't know. Maybe it's certainly not as many years ago. But nonetheless, it is still an iconic event, and it is still something that rounds off the Australasian season for 21 this year quite well. We start again, obviously, in New Zealand in January with the 86 series going around the country. And I know there's other events happening, obviously. But it's kind of a full stop on the supercar season.
Yeah, it's a nice bookend to the season, really, and a fitting track to have it happen, as opposed to, say, Sydney Motorsport Park or something like that. So it's going to be a great race. So I look forward to talking to you about that next week, and obviously talking about Jeddah and the Formula One Grand Prix, because I think that there's a few variables that'll come into play there yet, whether Christian and Toto go head to head with each other again in the rule book. All we ask for in all of these things is, both at Bathurst and in the Middle East, is consistency in the rules, consistency in the interpretation, and let the racers do the racing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, you mentioning the Wolf and Horner thing, it brought to mind this, with the Frank Williams passing, those guys that made Formula One. Bernie Eccleston, yes. Enzo Ferrari, yes, okay. But the likes of Ken Tyrrell, Colin Chapman, Frank Williams, Ron Dennis, all those sorts of people, absolute giants of the sport. The kids of these people of today, they're almost like pimply, spotty, bloody teenagers squabbling amongst themselves rather than the real men who actually forged those teams. They're not messing about with other people's money like they are now. They weren't messing about with other people's money. Well, they were, but they were having to get it themselves and work it and do all sorts of things. Now, it's a different deal. I'm not saying the old days were better, but by Christ, they were. That's all I can say.
They were significantly different and fitting to the era of the sport, but then equally now it's the business of the sport in a much broader sense than what it ever was. But
different world.
Fantastic. I am not going to pick a winner for either of the two events either. I'm going to sit on the fence like you and then sound very knowledgeable next week when we do the show.
I'm a great believer in hindsight.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful. I'm very good at it.
Well, I'll let you go and do your hindsight, aka sit on the couch and watch Bathurst on a Thursday afternoon. Why I upload this show so that it's there for people to have a look and listen to. And as I said, we'll update things on the Race Control Facebook page over the weekend for both Bathurst and, of course, in the Middle East. And until next week, Bob, I'll catch you then.
Well, we will indeed. And one of the beauties of Spark Sport and indeed Sky Sport is that I don't have to be up at 2 o'clock in the morning or watch the thing all day. I can choose what I want to watch, which is pretty much everything. So, got on your DT. Thanks a lot.
Well, most likely by the time you get to see this, a lot will have been set and the pole sitter will be there as well. We'll bring you those updates on our Race Control Facebook page. So look out for Bathurst updates across Bathurst weekend on the Race Control Facebook page. Until then, stay safe out there and we'll catch you again next week when we talk Jeddah F1 Grand Prix.